Is Chase Young even going to play for the New Orleans Saints in 2025? And is Brian Kelly gaslighting the LSU fan base? We've got all that and more coming your way today on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome back to another edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Hopefully you having a great Thursday. I know I sure am, because we're getting that much closer to the weekend. And again, I talked about it a little bit on Wednesday's pod, how it's a relatively light week. LSU's on a bye, Cajuns are on a bye, Tulane's on a bye, but we're definitely going to get to some of those games on tomorrow's podcast. But I do need to hit on the New Orleans Saints. They've got a massive game on tap against the New York Giants. And the first injury report came out yesterday, and it feels like there's no surprise when it comes to Chase Young. Now, he was already ruled out with the same exact calf injury that's been plaguing him all season. Has not, gotten a chance to show up on the field in a regular season game. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Chase Young might very well be the Zion Williamson of the New Orleans Saints. He's had like immense amount of potential coming out of college, but now it's like he just can't stay healthy. That's why the Saints were able to get him, I think, on the cheap after he spent some time as a Washington Commander and a San Francisco 49er. It's a big reason why he's been dealing with he dealt with an ACL tear in 2021, missed a lot of 2022, then traded to the 49ers, and he's part of the New Orleans Saints franchise. It was a very easy get to have him aboard, and he was on the cheap because of those injuries, but they are continuing to impact his career. He didn't start a single game last year. He played all 17, but he wasn't the guy that maybe you thought he should have been. Chase Young should be starting on the 50th part of the starting 11 of that defensive line because he's that good of a player, but the injuries are impacting him in a big way. And it makes you wonder as well, why haven't the Saints just considered just putting him on the IR, letting him rest, and then you can kind of figure it out from there? Because it's not like the old times where the IR is pretty much your donezo for the entire remainder of the season. No. Nowadays, it's a whole different can of turnips. You have an opportunity to get back on the field after a certain point because, after all, it is now a 17-game season. I don't think this is a situation where that calf is this big of a deal. A calf injury is nothing to, mince words about, but I can tell you that it can't be that bad of an injury to where he's missing yet another week. And this is a crucial game for the New Orleans Saints because this is a 2-game stretch that's going to determine how the rest of your season goes. I know it's kind of hyperbole, and especially considering this is a team that started off 2025 0-4. But you have to agree, when you look at the schedule, you've got the Giants and the Patriots the next 2 weeks. Both of those, I think, are a definition of must win, just to at least somewhat salvage your season and give your fan base some hope, some hopium to have out there. Again, your playoff hopes are out the damn window at this point, 0-4. But I would just love just one time, to see the Saints win a game in 2025. And the Giants, it's an absolutely perfect chance to do so. And the Patriots as well, to a lesser extent. I think the Giants is a lot more of a winnable ball game because you've got a young, inexperienced rookie quarterback in Jackson Dart playing on the road for the first time in the NFL. Now, mind you, that crowd's probably more Giants influence, but they're without Malik Neighbors as well. So they're going to have to rely on the run game to get them to the promised land. But I just don't think that's going to happen because the Saints team has shown themselves historically to be pretty decent against the run on defense. But again, this cat they have, I think he's going to be pretty good in the league for years to come. A lot like what we've seen from one Saquon Barkley, a former New York Giant. He looked damn good for that franchise, but now we're seeing Cam Scatterbo. He's been that guy bringing the boom in a lot of different ways. That defense is going to have to step up, but also Spencer Rattler is going to have to truly show out in these next 2 weeks. And I think the biggest reason why I believe that so much is because of who's kind of sitting in the background waiting to show up again. And I said it yesterday on the pod about Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill has always been that spark plug. Now, if he's 100% and recover from that chest injury over the next couple weeks and he's ready to go, I got a feeling he could usurp that QB1 almost immediately, or at least get plenty more snaps than Tyler Shuck, and we see that offense find its rhythm again. Because every time, I don't know why, but Taysom Hill somehow has that electricity to where this team almost gets a first down every time he's out on the field, unless he's starting quarterback. But when he's out there for those random plays, like the tush push and whatnot, like, it would have been amazing to see him last week. I guarantee you, if he was there last week against the Buffalo Bills, that Philly special would have worked out really well. And I love how I think people are finally catching wise. And I was seeing this on X, and I immediately said, that's the right. Thank you for saying it, because people have been complaining about the Saints going for the Philly special, and it's justified. It didn't work out. That said, if it worked out, Kellen Moore would be considered a genius. That's the thing about these trick plays or moments that don't work out. Now, mind you, this is a largely inconsequential game last week against the Buffalo Bills that will have no long-standing effects. But it's still a moment that people are going to be talking about. But man, he shouldn't have done this play, blah, 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 blah. You wouldn't be saying that if that play actually worked. It's just like the Saints going for the onside kick in 2009 to win this, to kick off the second half and eventually win the one and only Super Bowl you've ever gotten. If Sean Payton doesn't work, that play doesn't work for Sean Payton and they lose that game, I guarantee you people would have hated Sean Payton for a long time. And also, I think Sean Payton's tenure as the head coach of the Saints would have been a lot shorter. I don't even think he would have gotten past like 2015. But again, that's just purely my opinion. If that Saints team hadn't recovered the onside kick all the way back in 2009, that's kind of where I see that. I could be completely wrong, but that's where I see it. People who complain about the Philly special, it's justified, but at the same time, you'd probably be singing the praises of Kellen Moore if he pulled that play off, and I sure as hell would be. I am intrigued, though, in 2025 to see what they do against the Giants. Even without Chase Young, hopefully they can kind of get things done. Even with the offensive line as banged up as they are, because obviously Cesar Ruiz, he was limited in practice earlier on Wednesday afternoon. You're still dealing with a lot of other guys banged up at this point in time. So, like, you just look up and down that roster. It's not a good time at all if you're a Saints fan, just looking at that injury report. And it feels like that every single week we talk about it. The injury report is the worst thing to see because it's a complete list of guys that you would love to have be able to play. Jawan Johnson didn't practice. Trevor Penning didn't practice. Dylan Redunds didn't practice. Still dealing with the turf toe. Cesar Ruiz didn't practice. Chase Young, we mentioned him earlier, he did practice. Ones that were active, including Taysom Hill, Foster Moreau, they just got off the IR along with John Ridgeway. Isaac Yiadom was limited in practice. Trey Palmer and Justin Reed were limited in practice, but it's really good to see Justin Reed back because that secondary needs a boost, at least in my opinion, and hopefully they can kind of turn things around on that front. Meanwhile, LSU, without a doubt, is got a problem, and it's all because of Brian Kelly. simply because of the fact that this head coach has not, I don't think, based off of all the hearsay, conjecture, and observations as a fan, Brian Kelly's gaslighting this fan base. The health rumors about Garrett Nussmeier, they have swarmed since the preseason. Kelly shut down the rumors, and it was justified what he said, because people were saying it was a knee injury. But it wasn't. It was just a mild case of patellar tendonitis. Then you also started to hear rumors swirling, especially after the loss to Ole Miss, that Garrett Nussmeier may very well be shut down because of an ab injury, which he does have. Brian Kelly admitted that much, but it's not to the point where it requires surgery and would end his season. He said during the teleconference on Wednesday, quote, "Yeah, that's just misinformation. They're quite silly, actually. People want to know, but this is information. Those are not based on any facts," end quote. It's not a great look whenever you have people saying, and I think a lot of people observed based off of what we saw in Ole Miss, this was the worst performance that you saw out of one Garrett Nussmeier in his entire LSU career as a starting quarterback. That alone has to have you concerned for the long-term health and also the draft stock for Nussmeier. Now, I was never necessarily sold on him being a first-round draft pick. I always kind of leaned towards him being a day 2 type of guy, maybe round 3 or very early day 3, worst case scenario. I'd say round 4 would be the floor for him, from my point of view, just because I think he's good, but he's not that great level of quarterback where you're willing to bet on the franchise, bet the farm if you're any franchise in the NFL. And it's simply because he's been inconsistent. Like, I remember seeing him right as he was coming up and popping in garbage time, letting Jaden Daniels sit. I wasn't necessarily sold on him. And we're continuing to see that, hey, I'm not necessarily sold on him. And I think some of that is mainly just because of the fact that he's banged up. And I keep saying, if there is an ab injury that he is dealing with and it's that bad, they need to shut him down, because his throwing motion is messed up. His rhythm is not there. And if you are having him going into the bulk of your SEC schedule the rest of the way banged up, it is not going to end well, and you're going to have to throw it to Michael Van Buren when you need him the most and possibly trying to salvage this season. Because I believe they still have an outside chance of making the college football playoff, but you've got to be damn near perfect to do that the rest of the way. You got to deal with Alabama. You got to deal with South Carolina next week. You've got a lot of teams left on the schedule that are going to give you hell. You have to block that out. And more importantly, you have to win a lot of those games. I feel like a 1-loss LSU team has a much better chance than a 2-loss LSU team. And even then, I think this LSU team, based off of what I have observed from them over the last few weeks, I feel like they could lose 2 more games before the end of the year, because there's so many good teams out there that probably have watched plenty of film and are seeing this offensive line being absolutely putrid. The run game has been pretty much tossed to the side, which is so anti-LSU. I'll never understand it. That's kind of just how I see things. I don't think this LSU team isn't making the playoffs if we continue to see what we've seen through the first month of the season. Like, we go all the way back to the LSU Clemson game. It was underwhelming offensively. It required an oop-de-oop to beat them down the stretch. You had a really mediocre game against La Tech, who's turned out to be a lot better than maybe some expected, but it should have been a more lopsided victory. You should have whipped the tails off of the Florida Gators with 5 interceptions, and you can't get that many, a huge amount of points off of turnovers? Are you kidding me? That should have been an absolute banger of a game, and LSU should have won by at least like 3 touchdowns. If you're picking off an offense for 5 interceptions, including a pick 6, that's not great. Southeastern finally woke up, but again, that was Southeastern. I'll put that one as an outlier. Ole Miss seemed like it was more par for the course for LSU. And again, I firmly believe something's wrong with Garrett Nussmeier, and Brian Kelly has to be gaslighting the fan base at this point in time, saying, it's just misinformation in regards to the surgery rumors, but it's clear as day to see he's injured. I'm not going to say he's injured. He needs surgery because I'm not a doctor. I may have drank some Dr. Pepper before doing this podcast, but that doesn't qualify me to tell you whether or not this guy needs a surgery. But if I'm hearing sources that are seemingly valid, until you show me otherwise and show me the opinions and you come right out and say, hey, he's hurt, he's a little banged up, but he will be ready for the contest. Like, at least be upfront about what's going on with your team. And I was seeing something else, and I don't necessarily know if this was the intended way he meant to say it, but if true, that's an even worse look, if I'm being honest, is that during the teleconference, he was mentioning that they have Garrett Nussmeier starting up on the VR. Now, we go back to Jaden Daniels, the previous quarterback. The VR headset stuff, that actually wound up helping his game tremendously. And if they're just now starting to use the VR, what the hell are we doing? Now, again, that might have just been a slip of the tongue for Brian Kelly. I've heard a lot worse, especially this week, when it comes to slip of the tongues and maybe some words that weren't meant to be said that way. I think he's saying we're starting back up on the VR. I would understand that. But the VR should be helping your quarterback maintain the rhythm that he's been used to, because he's not getting hit during practice. I understand they're always wearing those red jerseys, but he should be used to dealing with pressure and using the VR to get better. It's a great tool to have, and I would love to see that being used more and more across the country. Obviously, price is an issue, and with LSU, I think price is no object, especially when you have the wealth of people like, Gordon McKernan and that crew. Like, you've got people that are going to give you money so you can afford these great things. But if Brian Kelly is continuing to kind of skirt the big question by saying it's misinformation, just tell us what's going on with him. He's got to have something not great going on with his torso injury. And I keep going back to Drew Brees. Your rhythm is not going to be the same. Your motion is not going to be the same. So you're not going to be able to get that zip on the ball like he did last year. And I feel like that's the biggest issue he's dealing with. And they're not letting it on to be they're basically saying, hey, it's nothing. It's fine. It's going to get better. Whenever it's clear as day, it's not going to get better. And I'm hoping it does, because LSU, I think, needs, and like emphasis on that word needs, him to get it done and get back into contention for the college football playoff. And speaking of the CFP, it was a massive day for Caesars Superdome, because they finalized the long-term lease to keep the New Orleans Saints in the state of Louisiana and playing at Caesars Superdome. This comes more or less the same exact day. And this actually is kind of crazy. The deal is going to run for 10 years, and then the Saints have an option to renew every 5 years all the way through to 2055. Hopefully we all make it to 2055. And it's been finalized for a couple weeks, but the sides needed extra time to finalize leases for other properties, and probably also make sure some John and Jane Hancocks and maybe some Herbie Hancocks were on those contracts. It's kind of crazy because that current lease that's the Saints have in place was negotiated back in 2009. It's been that long since it was renewed. and it looks like everything is pretty good there. And this also kind of goes back to what I was talking about a couple weeks ago, where the Saints had a chance to put in a bid for the 2031 Super Bowl. That is not the case. They will not be able to be in that contention for that bid in 2031, but they do get a nice little consolation prize with the College Football Playoff National Championship taking place inside Caesars Superdome. Now, why is that important? Well, you look back at the history of the national championship since, the turn of the millennium. Feels like every time the national championship takes place inside that Superdome in NOLA, one team is involved in it, and that is the LSU Tigers. 2003, you won your first true national championship in the BCS era. 2007, deja vu all over again. 2012, 2011, nobody wants to talk about that. Like, we're not talking about 21-0 where Jarrett Lee should have been put in that ball game. I will die on that hill that Jarrett Lee should have been put in the game at one point or another back in 2011 in the rematch against Alabama. Because what they were doing straight up wasn't working. And that was a big reason why for years Les Miles could not get the better of the Dictator. Then you have 2019, Joe Burrow leads LSU back to the national championship, completing one of the greatest seasons in college football history, bar none. Can they do it again in 2028? There's a distinct possibility. That said, I don't believe the guy that is the current head coach is going to get you there. You look at Brian Kelly's track record. He has had a major difficulty winning the big games. I was talking about LSU, Alabama for the 2011 national championship. The very next year, LSU was playing Notre Dame. Brian Kelly's Notre Dame. And what happened? Brian Kelly got his ass whooped. Manti Te'o, who was more famous for the catfish than his play on the field, he did not look great in that game from the word go. I remember back when I was working retail, back whenever I was in college, talk with people. And I said, the first team that blinks is going to lose that game. Notre Dame blinked before the kickoff. And it was just one of the, people talk about 2011 being one of the worst, national championship games. I think 2012 was way worse. Way worse. Again, that's just purely my opinion. But appreciate you listening into the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Make sure you give us a follow and also subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. And also make sure you check us out on social media. Just search Louisiana Lunch Hour, and we'll talk to you tomorrow with a Friday. We're going to put it all on the table here and give you the predictions for a lot of the games across the state of Louisiana, including that Saints-Giants game. Until tomorrow, talk to you later.